privilege of being the Executive Director with the Brown County Historical Society. And on behalf of the Board of Directors, I want to welcome you today. Some of you have been here already for our earlier programs this year. We're so pleased that we're able to do these programs in person as opposed to on Zoom. It's so great to see everybody, and I'm sure you love to be seen. So anyway, welcome. We encourage you, if you're not a member, please consider becoming a member of the Society. It not only supports our organization, but it gives you some great opportunities. You get prior notice to all of the activities that take place with the organization. You get a discount in the museum store, and of course free admission to the museum and to the Kiesling House, which is now under our management. So we encourage you to consider a membership, if you will. Our Kiesling House, which is under our management and generally has been open on Saturdays and Sundays, has had a change in its schedule. The reason we've changed our schedule this year, the Harkin Store and the Fort Ridgely Interpretive Center are not going to be open. And we have always partnered with them to have our activities on Sunday so that people can travel and look at all of the three of these historic sites. So we've decided then to shift, and we will be open on Fridays and Saturdays. And that'll start the second weekend in June and then run up through Labor Day. So that's a change for us. And also some of you have inquired about the popcorn wagon. Yes, the popcorn wagon will be open. I'm seeing some excited people in the audience. We, of course, have had a delay because with COVID we weren't sure what was going to be happening. And of course we like to have the popcorn wagon out when there's other activities going on. And so now we're waiting on other organizations to see how they will be scheduling, and then we will try to schedule our popcorn wagon on high activity days. So that's all I have for announcements. So at this time I'm going to invite Darla Gebhardt, our research librarian, to introduce our guest speaker today. I know it's going to be exciting for you. Thank you for being here.
Welcome to Bag Lunch and a Bite of History. The menu today is murder. Our guest speaker is Patrick Shannon, and he is the author of Minnesota Headline Murders 1900 through 1919. He is a graduate of the University of St. Thomas, and he worked for the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, and then spent most of his career with the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension as a special agent in narcotics and death investigation. His presentation today includes the murder of Dr. L.A. Gebhardt of New Ulm, which remains an unsolved murder. And of course, this murder is of great interest to me personally, as Dr. Gebhardt was a distant relative of my husband. Please welcome Patrick Shannon.
Well, thank you. Such nice words. I worked for the State Crime Bureau, and I spent 7 years. As the Crime Bureau, what we do, if a small town has, or a small county has a homicide, the State Crime Bureau sends out the lab and investigators to handle it. So I traveled pretty much the state. I never got to New Ulm. New Ulm is in the hub of crime. But and then when I retired, I always wanted to write a book, and I loved history, so I went through and at the Historical Society and found 10 murders at the turn of the century that were kind of interesting. So I'd like to compare what they did then and what we do now. And what they had was they didn't have a forensic laboratory for blood and body fluids. They didn't have a laboratory for wounds or fingerprints, gunpowder residue, ballistics, or DNA. They had none of that. So if there was a homicide, you're stuck. There was no scientific way to go about it. So I'm going to go through 3 of them today, and I'll finish with the one here in New Ulm. first one, let's see. This is a young lady. Annette's sign sticker. She sends a bullet through the heart of Herman Ship. She's 13 years old. And what happens is Shep, he was 21 at the time, and for the past year, he'd been dating her or telling her that, you're my girl, and we're going to get married. She said, I'm too young. He said, I'm going to pretend you're 17. Microphone, sorry. Start over. Anyway, she said that, he said, you're the love of my life and we're going to get married. She had to quit school at 11 because her mother died and she had to take care of the 4 younger siblings. So she kind of fell for this guy, and she said she only wants to love one guy in her life, and you're him. He said, well, we'll get married someday. And then he started talking her into having sex with him, and she did have sex. Well, one thing that happened that the little children in her would come home and say Herman, her boyfriend, was seeing other girls. They were kissing in public, so he wasn't starting to call her anymore. Went by with a wagon with another girl. This is this is in May of 1905. It's up in Traverse County, Wheaton, Minnesota. It's on the border. So she tried to get a hold of him. He wasn't answering, and one of the little kids said, my sister is kind of angry with it. She said, I'm not interested in that Bohemian bitch, I think he called her, part of the language. And so anyway, this young gal, 13, is stewing. She goes to the hardware store and asks if she can borrow a gun because there's rats in the barn. The guy at the hardware store gives her a gun, 5 bullets, and I think it was a 25 caliber at the time. Well, anyway, she had 5 bullets in it. She goes out to the farm. She's on her buggy. Goes out to the farm where he's working. He's coming in off the field, and he sits down in the buggy with her. She shoots. They talk for a while. She shoots him twice, one through the heart and other one in the chest. Shoots herself twice. Ricochets around, and she falls down. It's being witnessed by a woman here who's at the farm, Mrs. Dahl. So this is her, the 13-year-old girl, and the child's trial for murder. Now, she wrote, if I got it here, a message, a letter to the sister of this guy, and she says, dear friend, excuse me, I can't read without these. It is with great reluctance that I write of a subject which has been great pain, of which silence is impossible. It is a very dangerous subject to talk about. I've been going with him for a whole year, and all consider him a very honest and industrial man. He is the father of a little child. The mother of the little daughter lives in our neighborhood. And if I get a hold of him, I will kill him. The audacity of such a man. Well, she went out and did kill him. And she admitted the county attorney and the sheriff show up there. She told the whole story. Yeah, it's not a whodunit case. So this is her, and this is the boyfriend. This is the prosecutor. This is Wheaton, Minnesota. It's not during prime time. There's no traffic, so yeah. This is the jail at the time. This is the Wheaton Street again. These are the people involved in it. Again, this is the victim, prosecutor, judge, and this is a jury, defense attorney. This is a girl. So they took her after the shooting, put her in a hospital type, which is attached to the hotel, and they treated her. She wouldn't respond for about 3 days, and finally they got her to eat. And the women there going for the trial, which was 1 month later. Now, if you're in a murder case, it might be a year or so before you. So 1 month later, this 13-year-old kid was going for a murder that she confessed to, and the problem was, what we're talking about was, are they going to hang this kid? What are they going to do? It was hanging for first-degree murder, and they obviously it's not a whodunit or anything. what are we going to do to this 13-year-old girl? Well, that was a problem. Well, we better get through the trial first. And there's Ship again, and these are more of the characters. That's the letter I read, and she wrote one to Herman too, said she better watch himself, she's going to kill him. So they had plenty of evidence and went to the trial, and she testified that she thought she was pregnant. She was very sad the way she was treating, and that Herman was going to marry her, but he's out running around with other women, other young girls, and so she said that she was going to kill him and kill herself. Oh, okay. Well, anyway, the trial's set, and it goes, everyone testifies what I just talked about, and there's 12 men on the jury. So again, they're worried about where they're going to hang this kid. So the jury gets it about 7:30 in the evening to decide. And juries are usually, they got to go over the judge's instructions, every bit of items of evidence. They got to talk about themselves. So they went in at 7:30, these 12 men. 10 to 8, 20 minutes later, they said, we come up with a decision on this. And of course, everyone knew what it was, so they get everybody back. Everyone was going to go home, thought the decision would be made to the next day. They come back, and the foreman gives a decision, not guilty. Well, it's the whole thing is, I think all these 12 men had, the defense had young daughters or something, but they did not like the way this guy treated one of their own, and tricked her, and especially when she's a smart kid, her mom died, and she had to take care of her family. And so I found that a little unusual, that after a confession. So the thing is, I don't know if there's been any trouble up there in Traverse County with guys since then, but I doubt it. Okay, the next one, next one is this William Williams. He was, I think it was a gay relationship he had with this younger boy, and he was 26, and the other boy was like 14, and Williams kills this boy and his mother at home. The mother didn't want this guy hanging around with her son anymore, and this is the son, John Keller. This is the mom who lived. He went up there and shot him, and then shot the mother. The neighbor from downstairs came up there, and he said, William Williams, that son of a bitch, he shot me and my son. But that kind of language I thought was more modern, but they used that language in 1905. So this was April 13th, 1905. And Annette was in May of 1905. So anyway, he walks to the police department and confesses. And that's him. This is the jury. This is Ramsey County, and this is the courtroom then. This, let's see, right there, spittoon. They could smoke and chew and spit in the courtrooms at that. This was, they built a scaffold down in the basement down there, and this is from the cell. They walk them right down the basement. They've had guys, the stairs there, walking to the scaffold, they take a jump off it. So they had a priest walk with this William Williams. He turned Catholic at the last minute. He's had to grab something. And of course, the trial, he found guilty. These are the scaffold. And the steps, oh, damn it, darn it, excuse me. Right here, 13 steps. Bad luck, 13. Right here is a loop. They used a new rope. The sheriff used a new rope. And the problem is, they put William Williams, they put him in there, they pulled out the floor, he went, and his feet hit the floor. They're supposed to break their neck instantly on hanging. They didn't. They used a new rope, and they didn't stretch it. So so the deputies stood up here pulling up the rope as he choked to death. Took 14 minutes. This was the last hanging in the state of Minnesota. They said they've got to do this anymore. So he was buried. They had a hard time finding a cemetery who wanted the guy, and he was buried way out in north of St. Paul. And I'm trying to think. I'm sorry, I forget the name of the cemetery. And I went there, and he's buried in the bachelor part of the cemetery with no headstone. So, but that's the Ramsey County, the old Ramsey County courthouse where he was hung. Dr. Louis Gephardt, a dentist, he was at let's see, where was he? Well, let's go back. In 1904, New Ulm had 5,720 residents. 3,265 had German parents. They spoke English in school, German at home, and the adults usually spoke German in the street. But they made the kids learn English. So on Tuesday, as a mild evening on November 1st, 1904, Gephardt, age 30, was in his office at 5.5 North Minnesota Street, which is, I believe, on this block here. He was a graduate from Chicago Dentistry School in 1898. He graduated, and he's from Black River Falls, Wisconsin. He came to New Ulm, which made the 5th dentist in New Ulm. The 5,700 residents, but that doesn't count the rural area. So evidently there was enough for 5 dentists. This is him here. Okay, this is Dr. Gephardt's office. Oh, damn it. This is a newspaper, and this is a barber shop, and this is how you get upstairs. Well, the editor, at 9:30 in the evening, Asia Brooks, editor of the New Ulm Review, he's going through mail, and he heard a lot of noise up here in the Gephardt's office. So he ran up the stairs. He came out, ran up the stairs here, and that's what it did look like a few years ago, and ran up these stairs and stood on the transom here. It was locked up. Stood on the transom and looked in, and he saw a man in a suit going up and down. And he said, that doesn't look right. So he ran down, and he told a guy by the name of Kavanaugh, a plumber, come on up here, you got to see this. So he goes up, they stand there, they said, we got to get the cops. We got to get a doctor for this guy. They were scared that in there might have been more men along the side. Now this is the same railing that they stood on. What happened, there's doctors and dentists used to share the same. You go in here, this is a waiting room for both of them. The dentist is on this side. I don't have, on the other side is the doctor, Dr. Reinecke. So they came back, and the cop, Joseph Westenborn, went up with a guy by the name of Banky, and they kicked in the door, and they found a dead person, almost massacred, on the floor. Let's see if I got that. This is the crime scene. There's a little X here where the body was. They cut the blood out, but what had happened, that he'd been hit over the head with a sharp instrument, and then he was stabbed in the face and neck. So there's many reasons on homicides. I investigated them for 7 years, and homicides are mostly committed by people you know. There isn't this guy going around killing people. There are some, but generally not. They kill for money, jealousy, fear, resentments, and anger, and hurt. In my profession, we see a lot of guys been murdered over women. That's a common deal. The spouse, they just so get mixed up with the right woman. Anyway, So the chairs here, this is a rocking chair tipped over. So evidently, Dr. Gephardt, the victim, knew this person. Once again, and put the chair down for him. This is a screen there this is the waiting room in there, and across there is Dr. Reineke's office. So the safe is right here, $50 in it, not taken. So it wasn't a robbery. And because of the severity of the crime, we knew that it was somebody who knew this person, and it was revenge, hateful. Could not, as much as you feel bad, you just get an all-out overkill. And so that should have gave them some information that is somebody knew. Gephardt, though, was a guy, very popular guy in town, and no one didn't like him. So they got the chief of police, Adolf Klaus, and the sheriff, William Julius, at the time, and they arrived within a half hour after this was discovered. And they didn't know who the body was, so they rolled her over, and they still didn't know the body. Dr. Reineke, whose office, excuse me, did I do it wrong? Didn't know who it was, and they were neighbors. They looked in his pocket, and they pulled out papers from Dr. Gephardt, and they all were shocked. The next day, the autopsy showed that he died of severe blows to the head and 8 stab wounds to the neck and to the face. They notified his family in Black River Falls, and the brother told them, hey, open his eyelid and take a photograph of that, and you'll see a picture of the murder. That was their science at the time. They did that, a photographer here, and it didn't come back, of course. So, as you know, we've come a long way since then. But the sheriff and chief, they had no one to call to. They didn't have a state crime bureau to come, no forensic lab or anybody to come out and help them. Today, the scene would have been frozen. They would have taken pictures. They would have taken blood samples. They would have taken items left at the crime scene. This is inside his office. This is the way it is today. That door is this door. It used to be a dancing studio. I don't know if it is. Okay, he left at the crime scene. There is a hammer with one of the claws half broke. There is some strychnine. There's some pencils, and there's a handkerchief. Handkerchief has on it, you see a picture here. Elroy Ubo, is that his name? Before I came here, he showed us this display. It's got a picture, it's GRK, or the initials on it. George R. Coach, like this. So right away they got a suspect. These are Vogel Lumberyard pencils, and that again is the broken hammer. That's strychnine. These are evidence. So the following Thursday, they had a short service for Gephardt at his house, 408 South Broadway in New Ulm, and then they went to a funeral at the Congregational Church in New Ulm. That Friday, the Monday was a murder. He was murdered on Friday. They have a monster meeting at Opera House. They elect Judge Weber to preside over it. Einar Holidale, I hope I pronounced that right, county attorney spoke, and he told the crowd, 1,000 people, mostly men, said, calm down, we got the evidence, we're gathering evidence, I can't share it to you because that would tip off the killer, so just be patient. So everyone says, okay, good, sounds like they're top of it. On the 5th, which is 4 days after murder, Saturday, the word got out, it can't keep, in those days in New Ulm, nothing was a secret. They found out that George Cott's initials was on it, and so they went to his house. And I would think they would have went right away to his house, but looked for his clothes, and they said that he showed them the clothes that he wore on the day of the murder. There's no blood on it. His sister Ida showed him 20 handkerchiefs, all with the initials JRK. in the corner, and she does those in indelible ink. And they said that looks like just the one that we got down to. And he had some blisters on his hands, and the sheriff said, "George, don't go downtown like that, they'll kill you." He laid off work and stayed home because everyone thought the pressure was on that he did it. The Coach family was a very prominent family in New Ulm at the time. Then the investigation, real quick, they discovered Coach was in the drugstore the morning after the killing, and he's looking for some ointment for looked like burns. It found out that strychnine had been sent to Gephardt for over a month as medicine for headaches. Take this free sample, headaches. Turned out to be strychnine. So Gephardt just put it in his cupboard, and so someone was trying to mail him stuff. In those days, the mail came from Minneapolis. You'd go to, I guess, Haska. They went to Haska. They went to Minneapolis and came back. Very difficult to trail who it was. They didn't have fingerprints in those days. They couldn't. So someone was trying to kill him. Okay, the 19th. This is 18 days after murder. The people had it. Well, they had another monster meeting at the Opera House in New Ulm here, and the mayor, Charles Silverson, was in charge. And what they did, they hired Pinkerton. They had donations from the breweries, they had donations from the Gephardt family and people around. They came up with like $1,500 for a reward for the information leading to the death. It was $1,500. They hired a woman from Minneapolis who happened to be in there. She's a fingerprint expert. They never used fingerprints before. So she took fingerprints at the scene, but she had nothing to compare it to. So on the following Friday at 6 o'clock, the mayor calls up the sheriff and says, "Get you and Klaus and go out and arrest Koch. We have a warrant. We're doing this without you." So they go, they wait till 8 o'clock, go get him, and they didn't want a crowd. So they walk him to the jail. He lived near Herman Park there. Their house is gone. And they took him down to the jail and says, "George, you got an attorney?" He says, "I have 4 of them lined up." So they're expecting this arrest. His dad had some money. I'll throw this in there. A man walked from the crime scene to Koch's, Koch. I'm so sorry. I don't mean, I have a hard time pronouncing it. It took him 7 minutes and 15 seconds to walk. Now, George Koch was 24 years old in prime. If he could run that, it'd probably be half the time. So they got him in jail. They took the Bertillon measurements, and they didn't have fingerprints. They measure arms. They measure the circumference of your head both ways. They measure fingers, toes. They take every measurement possible. They write it all down, and they take a photograph and put it there, so you could possibly identify this guy the next time. So they come up with a trial for January 3rd. Hollandale, the county attorney, he steps down and he turns over to C.H. Childs, former attorney general of the state of Minnesota. The prosecutor. It seems that Hollandale had a law practice. A county attorney wasn't full-time. He had a law practice with the brother-in-law of Koch. So the trial starts January 3rd of 2005. I should say, I'm going to back up here a little bit. This is Dr. Reinke's office. The guy, when they kicked in the door, they didn't find anybody. They found that he went through the waiting room, and the guy jumped out the window, second floor. That's the window today. This was the window back then. He grabbed a telephone line and rode it to the ground. The telephone line broke, and he went to the ground, and he ran out on up Center Street, and they think to his house. This, I don't know how I got on the roof, but some years back, this is a picture of it today. This is George Cook. So, January 3rd, And they're dependent quite a bit on this Asia Brooks. He's the guy from the editor of the newspaper who went upstairs, looked through the trans, and saw this. They made eye contact. And he told many people over the time that he didn't know if it was Koch or not. The whole town thought it was Coach. I am so sorry. But is any of the family here, the Coach family? No? Good. I put out the name, right? Anyway, anyway, where the hell was I? Let's see. They go to the trial, and this Asia Brooks, the guy saw him, says, no, that wasn't him. And he had been telling anybody, he's kind of sure it was. So all he had to testify to, yeah, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. They showed all those other evidence, the hammer, the poison, they never found a knife. And so his father, Ernest Coate, 72, testified that the murder happened maybe between 20 to 9, about 9:45. No, yeah, 20 to 10, 9:45, 9:40, 9:45. And his dad said that his boy, his dad was a former bank president. He's a pioneer. He arrived in New Ulm area in 1861. He's county treasurer for the Brown County for 10 years. And he said his boy was at home at 22 minutes to 10. So how can you be careful? How do you know that? You know? Well, his son was 24, and he was out the weekend before too late, and he angered his dad. So his dad looked at the clock when he came home. He thought he was a little late here, too. Koch, in his testimony, he said that he went over to his friend's house, got there about 7, left around 8:50. He went to the barber shop, he went to the he went to the law office. It's his brother-in-law, played some cards. There, a guy gave him a pencil by the name of Vogel. This is the sheriff. Gave him gave him a pencil. He did have a hammer like that, but that wasn't his. And what he did, he walked around. Then he decided that he forgot. He left his office around 6:15, so about 9:30 or so, he forgot that he left the light on and went back to his office to turn it off. Now that would make me suspect because that's where his hammer was kept at for whatever reason. In the trial, they never came up with the other hammer. I guess there was other hammers submitted, but and they didn't have prints in. So the jury was out 41 hours, and it was a hung jury. 9 for acquittal, 3 to convict. So that wasn't very close. So the whole thing was on this Asia Brooks again. He was the guy who saw him. So the next trial was in Mankato. Judge Cray, the family hired 2 attorneys from Mankato. They allowed no girls under 18 and no boys under 21 to attend the trial. Again, smoking was allowed. So I want to point out too, when Klaus and the sheriff took Koch to the jail, they tried to fingerprint him, and he fought and wouldn't do it. So they let it go until the next day, and in the paper, they were chastised that the legal right of the sheriff and chief of police to force a prisoner to give his fingerprints had been questioned. The bearing of this legal fact has been the case upon well defined by the attorneys in the defense affirmed that the sheriff and the chief of police exceeded their authority in this matter to get fingerprints. So they never fingerprinted them. And they had that expert. There were some fingerprints on on Ryan case where he jumped out. He lifted up and there was some blood fingerprints. The second trial's in Mankato, and the sheriff from Mankato was told to get subpoenas out. We've got to pick 12 men for the jury here. He's out, he spent a few days, and he's coming back with, none of them are German. The sheriff doesn't want any German on the jury. So the judge sees that and says, Sheriff, you're out of it. get the coroner had to go out and get the subpoenas. He bought a mixture of people, but the sheriff Williams was his name. So they interviewed Asia Brooks on the stand. Childs was the attorney questioning. Did the noise upstairs indicate there was trouble upstairs? He said, I don't think so. Didn't you testify you heard quite a howling and anguish up there? I don't remember that I did. You don't think there was trouble upstairs before you went up? No, sir. Well, why'd you go up? You wanted to get in the game. And the game was that Dr. Gephardt, the high school boys used to come up there and test their skills, who was tougher with the young dentist. They wrestle and box up there. So he said, I thought that's what it was. It was roughhouse. Well, how long since the last roughhouse before was a common thing? He said, about a year ago. So this is Brooks, their chief witness. And so he asked him, he said, what'd you see in there? He said, well, the doctor is performing an operation. He thought, you thought so? He said, what kind of dentist would operate laying down on the floor, operate on a guy sitting above him? He said, I don't know, I'm not an expert in that. So this guy was bailing water all the time. But unfortunately, that was their key witness. So this jury comes to a trial, and it's a hung jury again. 7 to acquit, 5 to convict. So far we got, after 2 trials, 16 to acquit, 8 to convict. And now the third trial is on July 6, 1905. It happened November 1st, 1904. And this one, they bring in something new. It seems that a woman by the name of school teacher, she's 22 years old, Miss Mary Fitzpatrick. She's the daughter of state senator from Iona. She used to date Gephardt. And now Dr. Cooch is trying to, he goes over there with perfume, stops us off at 6:30, goes over there about 7, and goes in the parlor, and they talk, and he gives her the present. About halfway through that, a lady, the phone rings. It's for you, Miss Fitzgerald. So she goes and she talks on the phone. During the newspaper writes, during the visit, she had received a phone call and stepped to the parlor to answer it. She soon recognized it as Miss McCabe and pronounced the words, "It is Miss McCabe." The latter was trying to disguise her voice and succeeded at first. Miss Fitzgerald had been in the habit of calling Miss McCabe sweetheart, or some other such word would tell her, and she applied that term to her at this time. Coach is sitting in the next room, and he overheard everything that was spoken. She gets off the phone and he says, "What's that, Ida McCabe?" And Miss Fitzpatrick said, "Well, yes, it was." She said, "Well, it's been a good joke on me. It's that was Dr. Gephardt instead of Miss McCabe." Miss McCabe worked in the same building as Dr. Gephardt, but she didn't have a phone. So she used Dr. Gephardt's when she'd make a phone call. Thing is, she wasn't generally at her office at 8 in the evening. Dr. Gephardt was, when they went up there, was the only one working. And so they found that, and that was strong points for the prosecution. They thought, these are bringing it up, we should have spent more time on this before. She's a good witness. So they bought Asia Brooks again. He says he doesn't know nothing. He heard a little noise up there. He looked at the transcript, and it was really none of his business. So long. So the first trial, they deliberated 41 hours. The second trial, they deliberated 45 hours. This third trial, they deliberated 2 hours. Not guilty. So it's all circumstantial, and this Asia Brooks is probably the one who turned it around. They had hanging at those, and you had to be pretty careful. I'm sure they spoke to the jury. Are you going to hang this guy? Are you absolutely positive? This guy who saw him says it's not him. We got all this circumstantial evidence, but that's all we got. So they said that he's innocent and went home. He continued his practice for a little while in New Ulm. He wound up moving to Minneapolis, where he worked. That's the pictures again. That's the sheriff. That's the chief of police. It's arrested. And that's him now. That's him with the sister Ida. Pretty gal. She's the one who put the initials on all his handkerchief. They admitted that was his handkerchief, and what had happened, a drug fiend broke into the doctor's office, didn't know he was there, killed him, and left evidence like a pencil that Dr. Koch just received that evening. He left his handkerchief, and he left his hammer there. That's really quite a drug fiend who would do that to frame Dr. Koch. It worked anyway. This is the Opera House, I guess, where they had 1,000 people in 1904, 1905. And that's Dr. Koch 10 years later after. He's in Minneapolis, he's working on a circus animal, an ape or something. But that's him the way he looks. This is the way he looks 30 years later, Dr. Koch. Afterwards, the judge who handled the first case, Judge B.F. Weber, he was a county attorney, an elected judge in 1883, and he was on the bench since then. He retired because of his health, financial trouble of his own. His wife was in very poor health, and he went into despair and committed suicide. He was 73 years old. Childs, the prosecuting attorney, he died the next year, 1906, from appendicitis. Sheriff Julius, he remained sheriff until 1928, where he died at age 58. He's buried at the Catholic Cemetery in New Ulm. Ian Hollandale, the guy, former county attorney, he moved to Minneapolis after this trial to do his law business. So I think, I'm sorry if I rushed through this, mispronounced names or anything, but that's all. That's kind of, I have 10 chapters in the book, and I found it fun to write if you're into it. So thank you. I'll answer questions now. But yes, Kathleen.
Were there other suspects ever looked at, or was he the only one?
He was pretty much the only one. They went to Rochester. They talked to a drug fiend who was locked up there. They went to St. Peter and talked to a drug fiend. Both those guys had alibis. And very rarely it happened, but there were drug fiends who would break into doctors' offices for getting narcotics. So there was really no other. And I think today they would have, I think Dr. Koch would have a harder time because of the fingerprints, the blood samples, his sample, and on the handkerchief. I think he might have if it matched. But I can see the jury's problem too. You're going to hang this guy, and the eyewitness says it's not that guy. And those attorneys, the dream team, they made it all confused. That's what they do, they're good. Yeah. So jury couldn't do it. So other questions on any of these? Yes, sir.
So what happened is my parents, my dad passed away.
Oh, it's okay, Ron.
So
Your father passed away. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. But, okay, well, thank you for sharing. Thank you much. You're a good guy. Yes?
On the William Williams.
Yeah.
He was buried, did you say in the bachelor section?
Bachelor's second of, where's Bill's? It's a North St. Paul. I can't remember. It's on. Oh, I am sorry. I didn't plan to answer this question, but they have a section there, and in the old days they put bachelors in one, and they put the couples together. They put the bachelors way off in the corner there. Some have headstones, and he didn't.
Did they have an old maid section also?
No. Hi, darling.
What happened to the young girl who shot her mom?
Oh.
What kind of life did she have?
Well, her dad put her in a convent down in Minneapolis. No trouble there. And she went to nursing school, became a nurse. She married a guy by the name of Newcomb, who was a laborer. And they moved to North Dakota, where he worked on the strip minings up there, and he worked on the ranches, and she cooked and sold. I found out she had a 92, when I got a hold of her daughter, who was 92 years old. And she said, the daughter said that Tony, Annette, was the very poor family. She had 5 children, and there was, no one seemed to do well according to the daughter. They was very, very poor, and they had to work labor, and that the husband died, and his family was very mad at her, angry at her, because she did not go call the doctor. She said, I sent my boy to the drugstore to get some medicine, but she didn't. She didn't call a doctor, and he died at home in bed in some pain, so they were very angry with her. Her and her husband are buried up in North Dakota, but she had a difficult time. Yes, sir?
What type of a doctor was Dr. Coach?
Oh, I'm sorry, he is a dentist, pardon me. I'm sorry.
A rival.
Yeah, all right. There's 5 dentists in town, and...
Do you know where his office was at the time, Brian?
Yeah, I do. It's in my book. It'll take me, I'll get it for you, sir. I'm sorry, it's not far away.
I'll read it.
Okay, well, I'm sorry. I don't know. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Wasn't there a subsequent where someone actually confessed, like St. James, to this murder?
Yeah, he confessed, I think, in 1952 or something, and he got a free ride to New Ulm, but they found out he was. He didn't know the facts of the crime. That the newspaper and the detective did. Yeah. So but he did get a free ride home and to the hospital. Yeah. So again, today these DNA is such a big thing where they can find the matches of your cells at the crime scene thread. You just touch this. I just left my DNA on this. So it's when the lab goes in, the first thing you do at a homicide, you don't touch anything, and you let the lab go in, and they wear slippers, they vacuum, they take fingerprints all over, they take samples, they measure the temperature in the room, they can tell the temperature of the room, temperature of the body, at what time the killing happened. Now too, they got at least around the Twin Cities and many here, they have cameras all over the place, and for security, so there's cameras. So it's getting a little rougher for these guys too. But most murders, a lot of murderers, they do it once and they go to prison and they're good after that. They just anger, and this Gephardt murder was rage. This rage, overkill. The guy hit him so many times in the head and stabbed him so many times he got tired, and he would continue on, but he saw Asia Brooks, and he took off. He couldn't go down the stairs, and so he went out that window and took off. And the neighbors of the Cox family said that they testified that they heard somebody running by. They also said that they thought someone stopped at the creamery and washed. That was on the way home. So the dog chased this person, got to the gate, and that was it. There's blood on the gate, what do you call it, the top of the gate, and the chief of police sawed it off. They didn't have to compare blood samples in those days. It's been easy to compare Cooks to the wooden gate. So that's another thing they didn't have. They did the best job they can. There's a lot of pressure on these guys at the time because no one wanted violent murder running around the city. So I can't think of anything else. I have some pictures up here that I didn't have here. Elroy Urbo gave them to me. I'm 100% Irish. I have a hard time pronouncing anything but Irish. O'Malley, O'Toole, I can handle anything else. Sorry. Oh, you do? You're Irish? Yeah. Okay. Yes, sir?
If there's evidence that's been retained,
Yeah.
of course, at this point, this many years after, there's not much motivation to go back and try to compare any of the existing evidence with using modern technology, but it is feasible, I suppose, to go back and do things on ones that, murders that may be 50 years old or something like that.
Right. With DNA, they can't do that. They're finding out guys who are guilty, they're finding out guys who are innocent, getting them out of prison. But that's a good point. I'd take that up with the county attorney. I have called there, we thought of that. They said, well, then the pandemic happened. But we got to get samples from the victim and get samples from the murderer, which may be Mr. Cott. What happened is, Mr. Herbal, he's got all the evidence. They were cleaning out the evidence locker, I don't know, and he said, he wrote the county attorney and said, can I have that? I said, yeah, take it, it's over with. So he's got that. So if you could get that handkerchief and put it into the lab, I think that'd help out a lot. We got to go. Okay. I'd be happy to answer any question. I know some of you people got to go. So thank you a lot. Very nice audience. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming today, and thank you again, Patrick Shannon. This book is available in the museum store for anybody who's interested. It is fascinating. Also to reiterate, some events that we have coming up here. One Room Schoolhouse for anyone who has kiddos, kindergarten through grade 5, will be happening Tuesday the 22nd of June and the 24th, either or. You would pick one if you would be interested. I have registration forms and more information on that. Also, the Peacelink House will be opening on the 11th. That will be on Fridays and Saturdays from 1 to 4. I also have volunteer opportunities if anyone wants to come hang out over at the Peacelink House. So see me if you're interested in that. And then also on Saturday, from 12:30 to 3 o'clock, we are having our grand opening to the public for our Becoming Brown County exhibit. And it is free admission, so please come join us for that. So, again, that's Mr. Shannon. Thank you.
Thank you.
So much. Thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you.